Hands where I can see them. Mercer pressed Monica against the courthouse wall as attorneys watched in silence. She stayed calm. Please verify my credentials. Then a scratched brass tag fell from her portfolio. 7B, COUNSEL. Mercer mocked it and wrote her up anyway. Minutes later, the doors to courtroom 7B opened, and the woman he had humiliated walked inside. Mercer's smile vanished. He was about to learn what that little brass tag really meant. At 8:37 on a cold Cincinnati morning, Sergeant Daniel Mercer decided Monica Reed did not belong at the federal courthouse. He made that decision before he knew her name, before he saw her identification, before she had spoken more than 6 words. Rain had been falling since before sunrise, turning the downtown sidewalks black and glossy beneath the gray February sky. Cars hissed through puddles along the curb. Across the street, office workers hurried beneath umbrellas toward towers of glass and steel, while the federal courthouse rose above them in pale limestone, its tall windows reflecting a city that seemed determined to keep moving despite the weather. Monica approached the secured council entrance alone. She was 49, black, composed, and dressed so plainly that most people passing her would have forgotten her within seconds. Her charcoal coat was clean but inexpensive. The toes of her black flats showed years of careful wear. Under one arm, she carried a scratched brown leather portfolio, whose corners had softened with age. Nothing about her asked to be noticed. That suited Monica just fine. 2 hours earlier, she had been standing beneath warm yellow lights at Morningstar Community Kitchen in Cincinnati's West End, tying an apron around her waist while coffee brewed behind her and plates clinked against stainless steel counters. Morningstar occupied the first floor of an old brick building wedged between a laundromat and a narrow storefront that had been empty for 3 years. The neighborhood knew the place by its smells before its sign: coffee, butter, eggs, toasted bread. Monica had been coming there long enough that nobody asked why anymore. That morning, 68-year-old Walter Price had been waiting beside the pantry shelves when she arrived. Walter was a retired transit mechanic with broad, worn hands and a brown work jacket he refused to replace even though one cuff had begun to fray. "You're late, counselor," he said. Monica looked at the wall clock. "By 43 seconds. That's late when you're retired. We don't have time to waste." She laughed. Walter's laugh came easier around Monica than it did around most people. He had spent more than 3 decades keeping city buses running, then discovered retirement was much quieter than he had expected. Morningstar gave him somewhere to be. Monica gave him somebody who listened without making him feel as though listening were charity. By 7, the dining room was full of adults eating breakfast before work. Appointments, long bus rides, or another uncertain day. Monica poured coffee. She carried trays. When a woman with an injured wrist struggled with her plate, Monica moved beside her without making a fuss and carried it to a table. When an older man discovered the zipper on his coat had split, she found a safety pin in the supply drawer and fixed it well enough to keep the rain out. Nobody there knew how much her time was worth. Monica preferred it that way. Before leaving, she found Walter trying to wrestle 2 heavy food boxes toward the rear door. "You're 68, she said. "You're allowed to ask for help." "I'm 68, not dead. You want to argue or carry groceries? I can do both." She took the heavier box anyway. Outside, the West End was waking beneath the rain. A city bus groaned at the corner. Tires splashed through shallow water. Monica carried the boxes to Walter's aging sedan and placed them carefully in the trunk. Walter reached into his wallet. She stared at him. "What?" "Gas money. For walking 20 feet? You've got somewhere important to be." "So do you." He held out a folded bill. Monica pushed his hand gently back toward his chest. "Buy yourself lunch." Walter shook his head and glanced at the battered portfolio under her arm. "One day somebody's going to look at that old bag and think you don't own anything worth stealing." Monica looked down at the scratches. "Then they'll be disappointed." Walter chuckled. She closed his trunk and watched until he was safely behind the wheel. It was an ordinary act of kindness, the kind Monica rarely remembered by lunchtime. But Walter remembered. People who had spent enough years being overlooked usually remembered the ones who saw them. Monica knew something about being overlooked herself. At 27, she had lost the first legal job she ever believed might become a career after challenging the way black employees were being treated inside the firm. The official language surrounding her departure had been polished and careful. Professional fit, communication concerns, differences in judgment. She remembered the cardboard box. She remembered riding the bus home with it on her knees. Most of all, she remembered realizing that doing the right thing did not guarantee anyone would thank you for it. The years since had taught her something harder. Dignity was easiest when the world offered dignity in return. Character revealed itself when it didn't. By 8:37, the warmth of morning star was miles behind her. Monica crossed the wet plaza toward the federal courthouse, portfolio tucked securely beneath her arm. Sergeant Daniel Mercer noticed her from beside a temporary security barrier. Mercer was 46 and had worn a Cincinnati police badge for 17 years. He stood beneath the overhang with the comfortable posture of a man who believed the space around him belonged to him simply because he was guarding it. His eyes moved over Monica. Old portfolio, cheap flats, rain-damp coat, no briefcase on wheels, no tailored suit, no expensive car pulling away behind her. He stepped directly into her path. Public entrance is around the block. Monica stopped. Rain tapped against the metal railing beside them. I'm authorized to enter here. Mercer's eyes narrowed. This is a secured counsel entrance. I know. Something about the answer bothered him. Not the words, the calmness. He was accustomed to people becoming apologetic when corrected. Monica had not apologized because she had done nothing wrong. Then you know you can't just walk through it. I have authorization. A man in a navy overcoat passed behind Mercer, displayed a credential, and continued inside without incident. Monica noticed. So did Mercer. Neither mentioned it. Identification. Monica shifted the portfolio slightly. Of course. Her government credential wallet was inside her coat. She began moving her right hand toward it. Mercer's posture changed instantly. Don't reach! Monica stopped. Two attorneys beneath a nearby umbrella glanced over. Sir, you asked for my identification. I said don't reach. His voice was louder now. One of the attorneys looked away. Monica felt something old settle into her chest. Not surprise. Recognition. She had encountered that tone in boardrooms, elevators, office lobbies, restaurants. The moment when another person stopped responding to what she was actually doing and began responding to the person they had already decided she must be. But this was different. Mercer had a badge, and his right hand had moved closer to his duty belt. Monica kept her voice level. My identification is inside my coat. May I retrieve it? Mercer stared at her for another second. The rainwater running from the courthouse roof struck the pavement between them in a steady rhythm. Then he said, Put the portfolio down. Monica's grip tightened almost imperceptibly. Inside that old leather case were documents she had spent weeks reviewing, and tucked into an inner pocket was something smaller, a scratched brass access tag, dull with years of use. Mercer couldn't see the engraving. Not yet. Monica lowered the portfolio carefully toward the dry strip of pavement beneath the overhang. Now step back, he said. She did. Hands where I can see them. For one brief second, Monica looked past him at the courthouse doors. People were entering. People were watching. Nobody said a word. 22 years earlier, she had carried a cardboard box onto a bus after learning how expensive it could be to challenge people who believed their position protected them. She was no longer 27, but she remembered the lesson. Monica slowly raised both hands. Mercer saw an ordinary black woman in an inexpensive coat who had approached the wrong door. He had no idea that inside the scratched portfolio at his feet, the little brass tag carried 4 characters that would soon change the meaning of everything happening on those courthouse steps. 7B. Counsel. Monica kept her hands raised. For several seconds, neither she nor Sergeant Daniel Mercer moved. Rain whispered against the courthouse awning and ran in narrow silver streams down the limestone steps. Somewhere behind Monica, a bus groaned away from the curb. Across the plaza, an umbrella snapped open in the wind. Ordinary sounds. Morning sounds. But Monica's world had narrowed to the distance between Mercer's right hand and the equipment on his duty belt. Turn around, he said. Monica looked at him. Officer, I have identification. You asked me for it. I said turn around. She could feel eyes on her now. 2 attorneys who had been walking toward the entrance had stopped beneath a black umbrella. A woman in a tailored gray coat stood several yards away with a coffee cup held near her chest. Another courthouse visitor slowed near the security barrier, stared for a moment, then lowered his eyes to his phone. Nobody asked what had happened. Nobody asked whether Monica needed help. She turned, hands against the wall. The limestone was wet and cold. Monica placed her palms against it. The chill went through her immediately. Mercer stood behind her. "Spread your feet." She complied. Her scratched brown portfolio remained on the pavement a few feet away, close enough for her to see but too far to reach. Rain had begun blowing beneath the overhang. A few drops landed on the leather. "May I ask why I'm being detained?" "You're not being detained." Monica paused. "Then am I free to enter the courthouse?" "No." The contradiction hung there. She didn't challenge it. Not yet. Mercer stepped around to her side. "Name?" "Monica Reed." "Where are you going?" "Inside." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "I figured that much." Monica turned her face slightly toward him. "You asked where I was going. Don't get smart with me." "I wasn't." Mercer stared at her. That calm answer seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. Monica understood why. Anger could be called aggression. Fear could be interpreted as guilt. Silence could become suspicious behavior. Even a question could be written down later as resistance. She had spent much of her adult life learning how quickly other people could turn a black woman's tone into evidence against her. At 27, she had learned it in an office with polished oak doors and thick carpet. She had been a young attorney then, working longer hours than anyone asked of her, because she believed excellence might protect her from assumptions. When she questioned why qualified black employees were being passed over and disciplined differently, the meeting that followed had lasted 17 minutes. Nobody shouted. Nobody used an ugly word. They called her difficult. They called her confrontational. They said she lacked professional judgment. 2 days later, Monica had carried her belongings out in a cardboard box. The humiliation hadn't come from losing the job. It had come from realizing that every careful sentence she had spoken had been rewritten into something she never said. She had promised herself afterward that she would remember exact words, exact times, exact actions. Facts were harder to bury when somebody bothered to preserve them. That lesson returned now. Monica looked at the courthouse clock through the glass. 8:39. She fixed the time in her memory. Mercer said, "Identification. My credential wallet is in the inside left pocket of my coat." "Get it." Monica did not move. Mercer's eyebrows tightened. "You just told me not to reach." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Only for a second. Then pride covered it, slowly. Monica removed her right hand from the stone. Her fingers felt stiff from the cold. She moved them toward her coat. Mercer's hand shifted closer to his belt. Monica saw the movement reflected faintly in the courthouse glass. Her stomach tightened. She stopped. "Why'd you stop?" "Because your hand moved toward your weapon." Mercer looked almost offended. "My hand is where it needs to be." "All right. Get your ID." Monica reached inside her coat very slowly and removed a black government credential wallet. She held it between two fingers. Mercer took it. His eyes moved across the photograph and printed information. Not carefully. Not like a man trying to verify something. Like a man looking for a reason not to believe it. Monica watched his expression. "You work for the government?" "Yes." "Doing what?" "My credentials can be verified through courthouse security. I asked what you do, and I answered how you can verify that I'm authorized to enter." His jaw tightened. Behind them, one of the attorneys beneath the umbrella whispered something to the other. Monica couldn't hear the words. Neither stepped forward. Mercer turned the credential wallet over. "Anybody can buy something that looks official." Monica felt the sentence land harder than she expected. She had carried that credential through secure federal buildings, meetings, investigations, and courtrooms. She had spent years earning the responsibility attached to it. Mercer had looked at it for perhaps 3 seconds. 3 seconds had been enough for him to decide the credential was questionable, just as a glance at her coat had been enough to decide she was at the wrong door. Monica inhaled slowly through her nose. "Call courthouse security." Mercer looked up. "They can verify me. I know how to do my job." "I didn't say you didn't." "Then stop telling me how to do it." Monica said nothing. The woman holding the coffee cup looked directly at her now. Their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, Monica thought the woman might speak. Instead, she looked away. That hurt more than Monica wanted it to. Not because strangers owed her rescue, but because silence had a shape when enough people chose it at once. She knew that shape. She had seen it around conference tables when somebody made a remark everyone knew was wrong. She had seen it in office hallways when a colleague was treated unfairly and everyone suddenly found somewhere else to look. And now she saw it beneath umbrellas outside a federal courthouse, a building carved with promises about law and justice. Mercer handed the credential back. Against the wall. I've already complied. Then it shouldn't be difficult to comply again. Monica slipped the wallet carefully back into her coat. She placed her palms against the limestone. The stone felt colder now. Her right hand began to tremble. It was small enough that Mercer probably didn't notice. Monica did. She hated that tremor. Not because she believed fear was shameful, because she knew how easily fear could be misunderstood. She pressed her fingertips harder against the wall until the shaking stopped. Her breathing remained even. Her voice remained quiet. Inside, however, something hurt. She thought of Morning Star. Warm coffee. Walter pretending he didn't need help with those boxes. The injured woman whose plate Monica had carried without asking. People who understood that dignity often lived in tiny gestures. Then she looked at the reflection of Mercer behind her. 17 years of authority stood between her and a door she had every legal right to enter. Ms. Reed. Yes? What's in the bag? My work. What kind of work? Confidential materials? That answer changed his expression. He glanced at the brown leather portfolio. Confidential? Yes. You bring confidential material to a federal courthouse and expect me not to check it? There are established procedures for screening counsel materials. Mercer took a step toward the portfolio. Monica turned her head. Please don't open that. His eyes came back to her. Why? Because you haven't established a lawful reason to search it, and it contains protected documents. There was no hostility in her voice. That seemed to be the problem. Mercer had expected either submission or confrontation. Monica gave him neither. She gave him boundaries. And to a man like Mercer, a boundary spoken calmly could sound like a challenge. He bent and picked up the portfolio. Monica removed one hand from the wall. Put your hand back. She did. Sergeant, I am asking you to contact courthouse security. They can confirm my credentials and my access. I'll decide what needs confirming. The rain intensified beyond the overhang. More people had stopped now. A man near the curb held his phone chest high. Monica couldn't tell whether he was recording. Nobody spoke. Mercer ran his thumb along the worn clasp of the portfolio. The leather had been repaired twice. One corner was darker where Monica's hand had carried it through years of work. He looked at it with the same dismissive expression he'd given her shoes. This thing's supposed to impress me? Monica stared at him. No. Then what's so important in here? My work. Mercer smiled faintly. Let's see. Sergeant Mercer. It was the first time Monica had used his name. He looked up. She had read it from the badge above his chest. Her hands were still visible. Her posture remained controlled. Her voice did not rise. I am telling you clearly that I do not consent to a search of that portfolio. Something changed in Mercer's eyes. Behind them, the courthouse doors opened and warm air briefly escaped into the cold morning before the glass sealed again. The crowd stayed silent. Mercer's thumb rested on the clasp. Then he pushed it open. The portfolio opened with a soft, worn click. For Monica Reed, the sound was louder than it should have been. The rain kept falling beyond the courthouse overhang. Water gathered along the seams of the pavement. Cars moved past in blurred streaks of gray and red. Somewhere inside the building, a security door buzzed and shut. But for one suspended second, Monica heard only the leather flap fold back beneath Mercer's hand. Sergeant, she said. Her voice remained steady. I do not consent to this search. Mercer looked at her as though the sentence itself were proof of wrongdoing. You already said that. Yes. Then stop repeating yourself. He lifted the portfolio higher. Monica kept both hands visible against the limestone wall. She could have told him exactly what was inside. Draft motions, interview notes, federal correspondence, copies of civilian complaints, a sealed folder containing materials prepared for the hearing upstairs. But she did not. Not because she was hiding anything, because she understood the difference between cooperation and surrender. Mercer reached inside. The first document he pulled free was protected by a clear sleeve. He glanced at the government heading, frowned, and shoved it back without reading carefully. A lot of paperwork. Yes. For what? Legal work. Mercer gave a short laugh. You a paralegal? Monica said nothing. That silence bothered him. He tipped the portfolio downward. The contents slid. A thick stack of papers struck the edge of the leather, then spilled out across the wet pavement. Several pages landed beneath the overhang. Others skidded into the rain. One sheet slapped flat against the stone near Mercer's shoe. Another drifted toward the curb before catching against a security post. A few people in the gathered crowd inhaled sharply. Nobody moved. Monica turned. For the first time since Mercer had ordered her against the wall, something raw crossed her face. Not rage. Pain. Those papers represented weeks of careful work. But that was not what hurt most. It was the sight of them scattered at her feet, while people in expensive coats stood close enough to help and chose not to. Mercer glanced down. Maybe next time don't carry half an office in a bag. Monica looked at him. The temptation to answer came hard and fast. She swallowed it. May I collect my documents? Stay where you are. A gust of wind caught 2 pages. One flipped over and over toward the courthouse steps. Monica watched it go, her jaw tightened. Mercer crouched and picked through the nearest items, then something small struck the pavement with a metallic sound. Clink, a scratched brass access tag. Old, dull at the edges, heavy enough to have survived years of pockets, locks, security desks, and courtroom mornings. Mercer picked it up between 2 fingers. He turned it over. 4 characters were engraved into the face. 7B, Counsel. The woman with the coffee cup leaned slightly forward. One of the attorneys beneath the umbrella looked toward the courthouse doors. Mercer noticed none of it. He held the brass tag up. This supposed to mean something? Monica looked at it. Yes. What? It identifies authorized counsel access. Mercer smirked. Anybody can carry an old courthouse key. He dropped it. The brass struck the pavement beside Monica's papers. That sound landed somewhere deep inside her. For a moment, she was 27 again. A cardboard box on her knees. A city bus window streaked with rain. A job gone because she had asked why fairness seemed to stop at certain office doors. She remembered going home that night to an apartment that suddenly felt too quiet. She remembered setting the box on the floor and sitting beside it in the dark because she did not yet know what came next. She had thought losing that job would break her. Instead, it had taught her that titles could be taken, offices could be taken, paychecks could disappear. But dignity had to be surrendered, and she had never surrendered hers. Monica lowered her eyes to the scattered papers. Sergeant Mercer, I'm asking again that you contact courthouse security. He straightened. You don't give me instructions. No, I'm giving you the fastest way to verify what I've already told you. His face hardened. Then his radio crackled. Unit at East Council entrance, status check. Mercer lifted the radio from his shoulder. Investigating possible unauthorized access. The reply came through static. Copy. Stand by. Monica heard it. So did the crowd. Mercer started to say something else, but a second voice interrupted. Older. Calm. Professional. Sergeant Mercer, this is James Carter, courthouse security supervisor. Mercer pressed the radio button. Go ahead. We've run the credential you transmitted. Monica's eyes stayed on the wet pavement. Credential is valid. Monica Reed is verified. Mercer didn't answer immediately. James continued. She is authorized for counsel access. The attorneys under the umbrella exchanged a look. The woman with the coffee lowered her cup. Mercer's expression did not change, but a muscle moved in his jaw. He pressed the radio. You sure? A pause. Then James's voice returned, firmer. Affirmative. She's cleared. For several seconds, there was nothing but rain. Monica finally turned away from the wall. Mercer did not stop her this time. She bent down. One page at a time, she began gathering her work. The first sheet was damp along one corner. The second had a muddy footprint across the bottom margin. The third had landed face down in a shallow puddle. Monica lifted it carefully and pressed it between two dry sheets. Nobody in the crowd helped. That fact would stay with her longer than Mercer's words. Not one person. A man shifted uncomfortably. Someone else pretended to check a phone. The woman with the coffee took one small step forward, stopped, then remained where she was. Monica reached for the brass tag. Her fingers closed around it. The metal was cold from the pavement. She wiped it once against the inside of her coat and returned it to the portfolio. Mercer handed over her credential wallet. There. Monica accepted it. She looked at him. Am I free to enter now? He hated the question. She could see it. Yes. Thank you. The politeness made him look even angrier. Monica placed the last stack into the portfolio and closed the damaged clasp. She had taken 2 steps toward the courthouse when Mercer called after her. Hold on. She stopped. He was writing something. A small pad rested against his palm. What is that? Incident warning. For what? Failure to follow security instructions, evasive behavior, delayed compliance with identity verification. Monica stared at him. This time, the silence between them was different. James Carter had just confirmed her authorization over the radio. Mercer had heard it. Everyone nearby had heard it, and yet he was writing a version in which she had been the problem. At 27, Monica had learned what happened when powerful people controlled the written record. At 49, she knew better than to interrupt them while they created evidence against themselves. Mercer tore off the sheet. He held it out. You can contest it if you've got a problem. Monica took the warning. She read every line. Then she looked at the time printed at the top. 8:46 a.m. She folded the paper once. Carefully. Precisely. She placed it inside the scratched brown portfolio beside the damp documents and the brass tag. No argument. No accusation. No threat. Mercer mistook her silence for defeat. He stepped back. Now you can go. Monica turned toward the courthouse. Behind Mercer, a tiny red light continued blinking on his body camera. It had recorded James Carter verifying her identity. It had recorded Mercer's response. It had recorded the 6 minutes between verification and the false warning now resting inside Monica's portfolio. Mercer never looked down at it. Monica did. Only once. Then she walked through the secured doors, and the camera kept remembering everything. The warmth inside the federal courthouse hit Monica first. Not comfort, just heat. A dry current of conditioned air lifted the damp edge of her charcoal coat, while rainwater darkened the shoulders. The lobby smelled faintly of polished stone, coffee, wet wool, and the metallic chill that seemed to belong to every government building in America. Monica stopped just beyond the security doors. For 1 second, she did nothing. People passed around her. Shoes clicked over marble. A rolling briefcase rattled across the floor. An elevator chimed somewhere beyond the security checkpoint. Monica looked down at the scratched brown portfolio in her hands. A corner of one document had already begun to curl from the rain. She opened the case carefully, removed the damp pages, and pressed them flat against the inside cover. Her fingers were steady now. That mattered to her. Not because the fear outside had been shameful, because Daniel Mercer had wanted a reaction. Anger he could describe, confusion he could reinterpret, resistance he could write into a report. Instead, he had gotten compliance, exact questions, verified credentials, and a camera recording every second. Monica closed the portfolio. Then she took a slow breath and headed toward the elevators. She did not look back. Outside, Mercer was already telling himself a different story. By 8:55, he had returned to the temporary security office on the courthouse's lower level. The room was narrow and windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent panels that flattened every face beneath them. Police radios hissed from chargers along one wall. A coffee machine sat beside a stack of paper cups, filling the room with the burnt smell of a pot that had been sitting too long. Mercer dropped into a chair. Officer Elena Diaz stood at the counter reviewing a security roster. At 33, Diaz had been on the department long enough to recognize which officers treated a badge like a responsibility and which treated it like permission. Mercer belonged to the second group. She had learned that slowly. Most people did. Mercer was reliable on paper. 17 years with Cincinnati police, Few sick days. Reports filed on time. Quick to answer calls. Quick to make decisions. Supervisors liked those qualities because they were easy to measure. What was harder to measure was the way his voice changed when someone questioned him. The way routine stops became contests. The way he could turn a confused civilian into an uncooperative subject with 3 lines of paperwork. Mercer poured himself coffee. Diaz glanced at him. "Busy morning?" He snorted. "Depends what you call busy." He added sugar without tasting the coffee. Had another one outside who thought the rules didn't apply to her. Diaz kept reading. Another one? Walked straight up to the secured entrance like she owned the place. Credentialed? She had something. Diaz looked up. Something? Government-looking ID. Old courthouse key. Whole performance. He leaned back in the chair. Wouldn't answer simple questions without turning everything into a debate. Diaz studied him. What did she do? Mercer shrugged. Same thing they always do. Ask why. Ask if they're detained. Ask for supervisors. Try to make you second-guess doing your job. Diaz's expression tightened almost invisibly. Mercer didn't notice. He was enjoying the story now. He always did. You'd think after 17 years, I'd know when somebody's trying to play games. He took a drink and grimaced at the coffee. Security verified her eventually. Then she was authorized, after I checked her. Diaz set the roster down. That sounds like security verified her. Mercer looked at her. You taking her side now? There aren't sides. There are always sides. That answer came too quickly. Mercer smiled faintly and reached for a packet of powdered creamer. For him, almost everything had become a contest years ago. Driver versus officer, citizen versus authority, complaint versus badge, question versus command, win or lose. He had not always been that way. At least people who remembered his early years said he hadn't. But time had rewarded the harder version of Daniel Mercer. He had learned something dangerous. Most complaints went nowhere. A driver accused him of being unnecessarily aggressive. The report said officer safety concern. A resident said Mercer prolonged a stop after identification was confirmed. The report said suspicious behavior required clarification. Someone complained he treated questions as resistance. The file said communication breakdown. Words protected him. He understood that. 23 formal complaints over several years had gathered in different folders, different databases, different desks. Very few had survived review. Some had been labeled unsubstantiated, some insufficient evidence, some closed after supervisory counseling. One had belonged to Walter Price. 3 years earlier, Walter had been driving home from an evening volunteer shift when Mercer stopped him near Lynn Street. The stated reason was a dim license plate light. Walter had been 65 then, a retired transit mechanic with no criminal record and a trunk containing grocery bags and 2 donated blankets from Morning Star. He asked why Mercer wanted permission to search the car. That question became evasive behavior. When Walter refused consent, Mercer kept him roadside while another unit arrived. Nothing illegal was found. Walter filed a complaint 2 days later. In Mercer's report, Walter was described as hostile, argumentative, and unwilling to cooperate with reasonable officer safety measures. The complaint disappeared into review. Walter received a letter 6 weeks later. No policy violation established. Case closed. Mercer barely remembered him. That was the difference between the person living through humiliation and the person causing it. For Walter, the stop remained sharp enough to remember the exact streetlight under which he stood. For Mercer, it had been a Thursday. Captain Rebecca Foster had seen the pattern long before anyone wanted to name it. At 54, Foster ran professional standards with a reputation for being thorough but politically careful. Twice she had flagged Mercer for escalation concerns. Twice she had recommended closer review of his traffic encounters. Both times the department had settled for counseling and retraining. No major discipline, no sustained finding. No reason, as far as Mercer was concerned, to change. He had outlasted every complaint. That was what confidence looked like when an institution helped build it. Diaz picked up the morning incident log. Did you write her up? Warning. 4. Delayed compliance. Evasive behavior. Diaz frowned. You said security verified her. Mercer looked irritated. That doesn't erase what happened before verification. What happened before verification? She challenged everything. Diaz let the silence answer for her own. Mercer leaned forward. Look, Elena, people think if they know the right phrases, they can control the stop. Am I detained? What's your probable cause? I don't consent. They watch a few videos and suddenly they're constitutional scholars. Diaz did not smile. Mercer continued. I don't care what title somebody has outside my scene. When I'm working, I'm in charge. There it was. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a belief he had repeated so often that it no longer sounded extreme to him. Diaz looked at the body camera attached to his uniform. Did you dock that yet? Not yet. You should. Why? Because you should. Mercer laughed. You worried she complained? I'm worried you don't sound worried. He shook his head. Complaints are part of the job. That much was true. He had said the same thing after complaint number 12, and 16, and 21. He believed the system had proven him right. People got angry. People filed paperwork. Then life moved on. He remained Sergeant Daniel Mercer. They remained names in old files. A courthouse officer entered, grabbed a radio battery, and left again without joining the conversation. Mercer watched him go. Everybody's nervous today. Diaz glanced toward the clock. You know why you're here, right? I've got a hearing. You've got a federal hearing. Same difference. No. Diaz turned fully toward him now. Not the same difference. Mercer rolled his eyes. The hearing in Courtroom 7B concerned police stops, detention practices, complaint handling, and several disputed encounters involving Cincinnati officers. Mercer's name appeared in more than one file, but he had been assured repeatedly that none of it amounted to misconduct. City attorneys had reviewed the cases. Supervisors had reviewed them. The union had reviewed them. No sustained violation. No formal discipline. No reason for him to believe this morning would be different. I've testified before, he said. Diaz nodded. I know. Then why are you looking at me like that? Because federal counsel doesn't call people in for entertainment. Mercer smiled. Let them ask whatever they want. My reports are clean. Diaz looked at him for a long moment. That sentence would matter later. My reports are clean. Not my conduct was appropriate. Not I treated people fairly. The reports were clean. Paper had become Mercer's idea of truth. He checked his watch, then his phone, then reached for another creamer. Diaz looked back at the incident log. What was the woman's name? Mercer didn't answer immediately. He was typing something. Diaz asked again. The woman outside. Her name. He sighed. Monica Reed. Diaz froze. The change was small but immediate. Her hand stopped over the roster. Her eyes lifted slowly. Monica Reed? Mercer looked up. Yeah. Diaz stared at him. For the first time all morning, Mercer felt the tiniest shift inside his chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just awareness. What? Diaz did not answer. She turned her head toward the hallway. At its end, an elevator bank served the upper courtrooms. A brass directory beside the doors listed federal chambers and hearing rooms. Courtroom 7B was 3 floors above them. Diaz looked back at Mercer. The humor was gone from her face. Dan. He sat straighter. What? She glanced once at the body camera still clipped to his uniform, then at the elevator. You haven't gone upstairs yet, have you? Mercer's smile faded, and for the first time that morning, Daniel Mercer wondered whether the woman in the cheap black flats had known something he didn't. The elevator ride to the 7th floor took less than a minute. It felt longer. Mercer stood alone beneath fluorescent light, watching the numbers climb one by one above the polished steel doors. He told himself Diaz had been trying to get under his skin. That was all. Police departments were full of people who liked knowing something before somebody else did. A name, a rumor, a connection. Maybe Monica Reed had argued a case here before. Maybe she knew a judge. Maybe Diaz had seen her around the courthouse. None of that changed what happened downstairs. At least, that was what Mercer kept telling himself. He adjusted the knot of his tie. He had changed out of his patrol jacket in the lower security office and put on the dark suit he kept in a garment bag for court appearances. The suit was slightly tight across the shoulders now. He had owned it 5 years and gained enough weight that the jacket no longer fell cleanly when he buttoned it. He left it open. The doors slid apart. The 7th floor corridor was quieter than the lobby below. Gray carpet softened every footstep. Framed photographs of former judges lined one wall. Rain streaked the tall windows at the far end, turning the city beyond them into a watercolor of brick, traffic lights, and wet rooftops. Courtroom 7B stood halfway down the hall. A brass plaque beside the doors read, United States District Court, Courtroom 7BHON. Thomas Avery. Mercer stopped for half a second. Then he walked in. The room was larger than he expected. Dark wood paneling rose behind the bench. 2 flags stood motionless in the still air. Rows of benches faced the front, already filling with attorneys, city officials, courthouse staff, and observers carrying legal pads. The atmosphere was controlled, serious, nothing like the local municipal hearings Mercer had sat through hundreds of times. At the defense table, City Attorney Michael Grant looked up from a stack of folders. Grant was 51, narrow-faced, silver beginning at his temples, with the calm manner of a man who earned a living convincing nervous people that everything could still be managed. "You're late. Security issue downstairs." Grant checked his watch. "You have 8 minutes." Mercer sat beside him. Grant lowered his voice. "You understand why you're here?" "I've read the notice." "That isn't what I asked." Mercer leaned back. "They want to talk about complaint procedures and traffic stops. They want to talk about patterns." Mercer glanced toward the gallery. "What patterns?" Grant closed one file. "Several disputed stops. Detentions, search requests, complaint review. Some of your reports are among the records. None of those complaints were sustained." "I know. Then what's the problem?" Grant stared at him. "The problem is this is federal court, Sergeant. Nobody here cares how many times the department closed a file if somebody can show the underlying review was weak." Mercer gave a small shrug. "They've got nothing." Grant's expression changed. Not fear. Frustration. "Daniel, listen to me carefully. Do not improvise today. Do not editorialize. Do not make this personal. I know how to testify. Then act like it." Mercer looked away. Across the aisle, 2 attorneys sat at the United States counsel table. One was Laura Bennett, 42, dark blue suit, hair pulled neatly away from her face. Several color-coded binders sat open before her. Mercer recognized her name from earlier correspondence. Civil Rights Division. He did not like the phrase. Not because he had anything against civil rights, he told himself, because people who worked in that area always seemed to assume police were guilty before the first question was asked. Laura spoke quietly with a clerk, then returned to her notes. Beside her was another chair. Empty. A yellow legal pad rested in front of it. A glass of water. A nameplate faced downward. Mercer noticed the empty place but gave it no real thought. Grant followed his eyes. Senior counsel is joining Bennett. "Who?" Grant checked a paper. "Monica Reed." Mercer turned. "What?" Grant looked up. "Monica Reed. Senior trial attorney. Why?" For several seconds, Mercer said nothing. Then he laughed. It came out too quickly. "No reason." Grant studied him. "You know her?" "Maybe." "Maybe?" Mercer shifted in his chair. "I had an interaction with someone by that name downstairs." Grant stopped moving. "What kind of interaction?" "Security. What kind?" "She came through the wrong entrance." Grant's voice dropped. "Daniel." "It was handled." "Define handled." Mercer glanced at the courtroom door. "Credential check." Nothing happened. "Did you detain her?" "No." "Did you search her?" Mercer hesitated. Grant caught it. His face tightened. "What did you do?" "I checked her bag." "Did she consent?" Mercer's jaw set. "It was a security situation." "That was not my question." Mercer leaned closer. "Look, she came up to a secured entrance dressed like she was going to a neighborhood office. She kept challenging instructions. I verified her eventually and let her through. Grant went perfectly still. Eventually. Yeah. Was courthouse security involved? They confirmed her access. Before or after you opened her bag? Mercer looked away. Grant's voice became almost a whisper. You opened a federal attorney's case materials? I didn't know who she was. That sentence is not helping you. Mercer turned sharply. What does that have to do with anything? Grant held his gaze. Everything. If the reason you treated her differently was because you didn't think someone who looked like her belonged here? Mercer scoffed. That isn't what happened. Good. Grant opened a fresh page of notes. Because if anyone asks you that today, that is not an answer you want to discover while you're speaking. Mercer felt heat building under his collar. He hated being lectured, especially by lawyers, especially when the lawyer was technically on his side. I followed procedure. Grant looked at him. Then the record will show that. That sentence should have reassured Mercer. It didn't. Because for the first time, he remembered the red light on his body camera. He remembered James Carter's voice. Credential is valid. Monica Reed is verified. She is authorized for counsel access. He remembered the warning he wrote afterward. Delayed compliance, evasive behavior. The wording had seemed routine downstairs. Clean, defensible. Now the phrases felt different. He shifted again. Grant noticed. Is there anything else I need to know? No. It was the first lie Mercer told his attorney that morning. Across the courtroom, Laura Bennett looked up. Her eyes moved briefly from Grant to Mercer. Then she glanced at the empty chair beside her. Mercer followed her gaze. The nameplate was still face down. He suddenly wanted to see it. A clerk crossed the room carrying a stack of files, blocking his view for a moment. Someone in the gallery coughed. A phone vibrated and was quickly silenced. Outside the tall windows, rain washed down the glass in silver ribbons. Grant kept speaking. Today's hearing is not criminal. Judge Avery is reviewing evidence concerning complaint procedures, officer conduct, and whether supervisory practices adequately identified repeat concerns. Mercer barely heard him. His eyes were fixed on the empty chair. The clerk finished placing files near the bench and stepped away. Laura Bennett straightened a folder. Still no Monica. Mercer felt some of his confidence return. Maybe she wasn't coming. Maybe Grant had the name wrong. Maybe Monica Reed was common. Maybe the woman downstairs was a contractor, a paralegal, somebody with temporary access. He leaned back. See? Grant frowned. See what? Nothing. The courtroom doors opened. Every head near the back turned instinctively. A federal marshal entered. Behind him came 2 city officials. Then the doors shut. Not her. Mercer exhaled through his nose. He almost smiled. He had spent 17 years watching nervous people build disasters in their minds before a hearing. He refused to become one of them now. He knew his reports. He knew department policy. He knew how these things worked. Complaints sounded ugly when civilians told them. Then attorneys examined details. Context emerged. Reasonable suspicion, officer discretion, safety concerns. Suddenly, outrage became procedure. He had survived that process 23 times. He could survive it again. Michael Grant tapped a page. Your report on the Price stop. 3 years ago, you called him hostile and evasive. Mercer frowned. Who? Walter Price. Mercer searched his memory. Nothing. Older guy. Vehicle search issue? A faint image returned. Night. Old sedan. A man asking why. Yeah. I remember. His complaint is part of the record. It was cleared. That's what you keep saying. Because it matters. Grant's mouth tightened. It matters until somebody proves the clearing process was flawed. Before Mercer could answer, the side door behind the bench opened. The courtroom clerk entered. 5 minutes. Conversation lowered immediately. Laura closed one binder and reached for another. The empty chair remained empty. Mercer's heartbeat steadied. Then movement appeared through the narrow glass panel beside the restricted counsel entrance. A charcoal coat. Mercer's body stiffened. The figure moved closer. Rain-darkened shoulders. Worn black flats. Scratched brown leather portfolio. Monica Reed. Mercer stopped breathing for a moment. She did not look toward him. She stood outside the restricted side entrance and opened the portfolio. Her fingers moved past damp legal papers, past the folded incident warning Mercer had written. Then she removed something small and brass. Mercer recognized it before she raised it. The scratched tag, the one he had dropped onto the wet pavement. 7B, COUNSEL. Monica inserted it into the lock. For half a second, nothing happened. Mercer felt a ridiculous flash of hope. Then the light above the lock changed from red to green. Click. The door opened. Monica stepped inside. Laura Bennett rose, not like someone greeting a visitor, like a colleague greeting the person whose chair she had been saving. Michael Grant slowly turned his head toward Mercer. Mercer could not meet his eyes. Monica removed her damp charcoal coat. Beneath it she wore a simple dark suit. No dramatic jewelry, no display of status. She placed the scratched portfolio beside the empty chair. The clerk turned the nameplate upright. Mercer could finally read it. Monica Reed, United States Department of Justice. The room seemed to narrow around him. Everything from the courthouse steps returned at once. Public entrances around the block. Anybody can buy something that looks official. Anybody can carry an old courthouse key. He remembered her hands against the stone, her papers in the rain, her warning folded without argument, her calm voice asking him to verify her credentials. Monica sat down. Still, she did not look at him. That was somehow worse. Then the courtroom clerk walked to the center of the room. All rise. Benches shifted. Chairs scraped against the floor. Mercer stood with everyone else, but his legs suddenly felt too heavy. The clerk drew a breath. Court is now in session. The Honorable Thomas Avery presiding. Judge Avery entered. Everyone remained standing. The clerk continued. And appearing for the United States. Mercer's eyes locked on Monica. This time she finally looked back. Not angry, not triumphant. Simply present. Senior Trial Attorney Monica Reed, United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. And in that instant, Daniel Mercer understood exactly why Elena Diaz had stopped smiling. For the first time that morning, Mercer did not look like a man in control. His shoulders had gone rigid beneath his dark suit. One hand rested flat against the table, while the other gripped the edge of a legal pad hard enough to bend the cardboard backing. Across the aisle, Monica Reed sat beneath the seal of the United States, with the same scratched brown portfolio beside her chair. The same woman, the same worn black flats, the same calm face. Nothing about her had changed. Only Mercer's understanding had. Judge Thomas Avery, 63, took his seat behind the bench and surveyed the courtroom. You may be seated. Wooden benches creaked. Attorneys settled. Papers shifted. Mercer remained standing half a second too long before Michael Grant touched his sleeve. Sit down. Mercer did. His eyes never left Monica. Grant leaned closer. What exactly happened downstairs? Mercer kept his voice low. I told you. No. You gave me the version that made you comfortable. I want the version her camera is going to show. Mercer turned. Her camera? Grant's expression darkened. You don't know? Before Mercer could answer, Judge Avery began. This hearing concerns allegations of recurring unlawful detention practices, disputed search procedures, and deficiencies in complaint review involving members of the Cincinnati Police Department. The court will hear evidence regarding both individual incidents and supervisory practices. Mercer heard the words, but his attention remained on Monica. She opened the portfolio carefully. One damp document had wrinkled along the lower corner. Mercer recognized it. He had watched it land in a puddle. Monica flattened it beneath her palm. No anger, no theatrical glance in his direction. That restraint unsettled him more than accusation would have. Laura Bennett leaned toward Monica and whispered something. Monica nodded. Then she stood. Your Honor. Judge Avery looked over his glasses. Ms. Reed, I need to disclose a development before today's testimony proceeds. Michael Grant became very still. Mercer felt his stomach tighten. Monica's voice carried clearly through the courtroom. Approximately 40 minutes ago, while entering this building through the secured counsel entrance, I was stopped by Sergeant Daniel Mercer. A subtle movement passed through the gallery. Heads turned. Mercer's face flushed. Monica continued. My federal credentials were questioned. My portfolio was searched despite my expressly withholding consent. Its contents were emptied onto the pavement. Judge Avery's expression changed. Not dramatically. His attention simply sharpened. Monica went on. Courthouse security subsequently verified both my identity and my authorization to enter. After that verification, Sergeant Mercer issued me a written incident warning describing me as evasive and stating that I delayed identity verification. Laura placed the folded warning on the table. Grant closed his eyes for one brief second. Judge Avery looked toward Mercer. Sergeant, remain silent for now. Mercer swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. Monica took a breath. This morning's encounter gives me direct personal knowledge potentially relevant to subjects already before the court. Because of that, I believe it would be inappropriate for me to personally examine Sergeant Mercer. Mercer looked up sharply. That was not what he expected. Neither was the courtroom. Monica could have stayed at counsel table. She could have questioned him herself. She could have used every minute of what happened outside to place him under pressure in front of a federal judge. Instead, she was stepping away. Judge Avery studied her. You are asking to withdraw from examination? From questioning Sergeant Mercer personally? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bennett is fully prepared to proceed. I will make myself available as a fact witness if the court believes my testimony is necessary. The room stayed quiet. Something changed in Michael Grant's expression. For the first time, he looked at Monica not as opposing counsel, but as someone who had just demonstrated exactly the kind of restraint his own client had failed to show. Judge Avery nodded. That is appropriate. Ms. Bennett will conduct examination. Ms. Reed will be treated as a potential witness regarding the incident this morning. Thank you, Your Honor. Monica sat. Mercer stared at her. She had more authority in that room than he had realized, and the first thing she had done with it was limit her own power. The contrast was impossible to miss. Grant leaned close again. You understand what she just did? Mercer said nothing. She protected the integrity of the hearing. I know, no. I don't think you do. Mercer's jaw tightened. Grant continued under his breath. If she had wanted revenge, she could have tried to make this personal. Instead, she just made herself more credible. Mercer looked toward the bench. Can we object to using what happened downstairs? Grant gave him a hard look. If the court finds it relevant, no objection is going to make the video disappear. Video. Again. Mercer's body camera suddenly felt heavier even though it was downstairs in a docking station. He pictured the tiny red light. He remembered Monica noticing it. Laura Bennett stood. She carried no anger in her posture, no satisfaction. Only a binder and 3 sheets of paper. Your Honor, before we turn to the historical complaint files, the United States requests permission to address this morning's incident because it bears directly on the reliability of officer reporting and the department's review process. Grant stood. Your Honor, the city objects to expanding the scope of this hearing based on an encounter that occurred less than an hour ago and has not undergone internal review. Laura looked toward him. With respect, that's precisely why it matters. Judge Avery raised a hand. One at a time. Grant sat. Laura continued. The issue is not whether today's encounter has been administratively adjudicated. The issue is whether Sergeant Mercer created a written record that conflicts with contemporaneous verification and recorded evidence. Mercer's throat went dry. Judge Avery looked toward Laura. You have the relevant recording? Yes, Your Honor. Courthouse security preserved the radio traffic, and Sergeant Mercer's body camera uploaded automatically when he entered the secure facility. Mercer turned toward Grant. Grant did not look back. Laura added, Ms. Reed also retained the written warning issued after her credentials were confirmed. Judge Avery nodded. I'll allow limited examination regarding the sequence and the written record. We can determine broader relevance after reviewing the evidence. Thank you. Grant stood. Your Honor, I request a brief recess to confer with my client. You'll have 5 minutes. The gavel did not fall. It didn't need to. The room loosened slightly as low conversation returned. Grant grabbed Mercer's arm. Conference room, now! They moved into a small side room behind the city table. The door shut. Grant turned on Mercer immediately. Tell me everything. Mercer crossed his arms. I stopped her. I know that. She approached the secured entrance. I know that. I asked for ID. And? She questioned why. And? I told her to face the wall. Grant stared. You put a Justice Department attorney against the courthouse wall? I didn't know she was a Justice Department attorney. Grant slapped his palm against the table. Stop saying that. Mercer fell silent. Grant's voice dropped. That is exactly the problem they're going to build this around. She was entitled to lawful treatment whether she was federal counsel, a clerk, a visitor, or nobody you considered important. Mercer's face hardened. She was evasive. What did she evade? She kept asking questions. What question did she refuse to answer? Mercer hesitated. Grant saw it. Daniel. She gave me her name. Did she give you identification? Yes. Did security verify it? Yes. Did you hear the verification? Yes. Grant closed his eyes. And then you wrote that her identity could not be satisfactorily verified? Mercer looked away. I wrote that she delayed verification. After verification had already occurred, silence. Grant exhaled slowly. How much time? I don't know. A knock came at the door. Laura Bennett's voice sounded from outside. Counsel, we're ready? Grant opened the door. Laura stood in the hallway holding a printed transcript. She offered it to him. Courtesy copy. Grant took it. His eyes moved to the first highlighted timestamp, then the second. His face changed. He looked at Mercer. 6 minutes. Mercer frowned. What? Grant held up the page. Security confirmed her credentials at 8:40. His finger moved lower. You issued the warning at 8:46. Laura said nothing. She didn't need to. Grant looked at Mercer as if seeing the case for the first time. Then the courtroom clerk opened the main door. All parties, please return. They walked back in. Monica remained at the counsel table, hands folded beside the scratched portfolio. Mercer sat. Laura stepped to the center of the courtroom. She placed Mercer's incident warning on the evidence display. Beside it appeared the body camera transcript. 2 records, 6 minutes apart. 1 camera, 1 written version. Laura looked directly at Mercer. Sergeant, we're going to begin with 18 minutes from this morning. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a monitor beside the witness stand came alive. For Daniel Mercer, the first image was ordinary enough to almost feel harmless. Rain, gray stone, the federal courthouse entrance, a woman in a charcoal coat walking toward the secured door. Then his own voice filled the room. Public entrance is around the block. Mercer shifted in his chair. The sound was different when it came through courtroom speakers. Harder, flatter. There was no street noise swallowing the edge in his tone. No movement to distract from it. Every word seemed to arrive stripped of context and laid bare beneath fluorescent light. On the screen, Monica stopped. I'm authorized to enter here. Laura did not interrupt. She let the video run. Mercer watched himself look Monica up and down. He had not remembered doing that. Or maybe he had simply never considered it important. The camera caught everything his memory had softened. The pause at her shoes, the glance at the portfolio, the way his mouth tightened before he asked for identification. Monica sat at the counsel table now, hands folded quietly in front of her. She did not look at the screen. She looked at Mercer. Don't reach, his recorded voice snapped. On the video, Monica froze. Then came her answer. Sir, you asked for my identification. Mercer stared down at the table. Laura stood beside the display. Sergeant, is that your voice? Yes. Is that your body camera recording? Yes. Was the recording altered? No. Did Ms. Reed make any sudden movement before you told her not to reach? Mercer looked toward Michael Grant. Grant gave no signal. No. Laura nodded. The video continued. Monica explained where her credential wallet was. Mercer ordered her against the wall. A quiet murmur moved through the gallery, then disappeared as quickly as it came. Judge Avery looked over. The room stilled. On the monitor, Monica's palms touched wet limestone. Her voice remained calm. May I ask why I'm being detained? You're not being detained. Then am I free to enter the courthouse? No. Laura paused the video. The frozen image showed Mercer standing behind Monica. His hand rested near his duty belt. She turned toward him. Sergeant, at that moment, was Ms. Reed free to leave? Mercer hesitated. She was part of a security inquiry. That wasn't my question. No. So she was not free to leave. No. Yet you told her she was not being detained. Mercer shifted. I meant not formally detained. Laura's expression stayed neutral. What does formally detained mean under your department policy? Grant stood. Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion beyond the scope. Judge Avery looked at Laura. Rephrase. Laura nodded. Sergeant, does your training teach that a person who is not free to leave is being detained? Mercer's jaw tightened. Yes. The answer landed quietly. Laura restarted the video. The courtroom watched Monica remove her credential wallet slowly, watched Mercer take it, watched him examine it for only a few seconds. Then his recorded voice came again. Anybody can buy something that looks official. A man in the gallery exhaled sharply. Monica's expression did not change. Laura stopped the video. Did you attempt to scan the credential? No. Did you call the issuing agency? No. Did you ask courthouse security whether Ms. Reed was authorized? Eventually. Laura glanced at the transcript. What prevented you from doing that immediately? Mercer leaned back slightly. She was being evasive. Laura looked at him. In what way? She kept questioning me. Did she refuse to provide her name? No. Did she refuse to provide identification? No. Did she attempt to walk away? No. Did she threaten you? No. Did she raise her voice? Mercer paused. No. Laura let the silence stay. Then she pressed play. Monica's voice filled the courtroom. Call courthouse security. They can verify me. Mercer watched himself answer. I know how to do my job. The sound seemed to hang there. Laura stopped the recording again. Ms. Reed suggested the exact verification method you later used. Yes. And you rejected that suggestion. I didn't reject it. You did not use it at that time. No. Instead, you ordered her back against the wall. Mercer said nothing. Laura moved on. The next image showed the portfolio. Mercer's hand reaching toward it. Monica's voice. Please don't open that. Then, I do not consent to a search of that portfolio. The room was completely still now. Laura looked toward Mercer. Did Ms. Reed consent? No. Did you have a warrant? No. Had she been arrested? No. Did you have information that the portfolio contained a weapon? No. Contraband? No. Any specific threat? Mercer looked irritated. It was a security entrance. Laura nodded. And courthouse security had established procedures for screening counsel materials, correct? Yes. Procedures that did not require you to empty confidential legal documents onto the pavement. Grant stood. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Avery said. Laura did not react. She simply touched the screen. The video resumed. The portfolio opened. Papers scattered. The courtroom watched the documents hit wet pavement one after another. A page slid beneath Mercer's shoe. Another flipped into the rain. Then the brass tag fell. The metallic clink sounded unusually clear through the speakers. Mercer picked it up. The camera focused enough for the engraved words to be visible. 7B. Counsel. His recorded voice followed. Anybody can carry an old courthouse key. This time, nobody in the gallery moved at all. Monica lowered her eyes. For the first time since testimony began, something passed across her face. Not embarrassment. Memory. She remembered kneeling in that rain. The papers. The silence. The people who could have helped and did not. Laura did not ask a question. She let the image speak. Then the radio crackled. James Carter's voice filled the courtroom. "Sergeant Mercer, this is James Carter, courthouse security supervisor." Mercer sat straighter. "We've run the credential you transmitted." A pause. "Credential is valid. Monica Reed is verified." Laura raised one hand. The video stopped. On the screen, the timestamp read 8:40:12. Laura turned. "Sergeant, did you hear that transmission?" "Yes." "Did you understand it?" "Yes." "Did you believe Mr. Carter was mistaken?" "No." She pressed play. James's voice returned. "She is authorized for counsel access." Then Mercer's voice. "You sure?" James answered. "Affirmative. She's cleared." Laura paused it again. 8:40:27. She looked toward the evidence table. "Your Honor, may we display Exhibit 14? Judge Avery nodded. The screen changed. Mercer's written incident warning appeared beside the body camera timestamp. At the top, 8:46 a.m. Laura read from the warning. Subject displayed evasive behavior and delayed satisfactory identity verification. She looked at Mercer. 6 minutes earlier, courthouse security told you Ms. Reed was verified and authorized. Mercer rubbed his thumb along the edge of the witness box. Yes. Why did you write that her identity verification remained unsatisfactory? I didn't say it remained unsatisfactory. Laura pointed at the wording. You wrote that she delayed satisfactory verification. She did. How? She questioned the process. Before or after providing identification? Both. Did her questions prevent verification? No. Did she interfere with the security supervisor? No. Did she provide false information? No. Then what delayed verification? Mercer stared at her. I had to investigate. Laura took one step closer. Because of something she did? Yes. What? His answer came faster now. Her attitude. The word entered the courtroom and seemed to change the temperature. Laura did not move. Judge Avery's eyes narrowed slightly. Monica's fingers tightened once around the edge of her legal pad, then relaxed. Laura spoke softly. What about her attitude required further investigation? Mercer looked at Grant. Grant stared down at his notes. She was questioning me. You have already said that. She was acting like she had authority over the situation. Did she claim authority over you? No. Did she issue you orders? No. Did she threaten consequences? No. No. Mercer's voice was smaller now. Laura returned to the recording. The last portion played. Monica collected her papers alone. She asked, Am I free to enter now? Mercer answered yes, then stopped her. The warning was written, handed over. Monica read it, folded it, placed it into the same portfolio. The red light reflected briefly in the courthouse glass. Laura stopped the video. 18 minutes. The entire encounter compressed into evidence. No shouting. No dramatic resistance. No hidden weapon. No false identity. Just a woman trying to enter a door she was authorized to use, and an officer repeatedly finding reasons not to believe her. Laura closed the transcript. Sergeant Mercer, your report says Ms. Reed was evasive. Yes. Your report says she delayed identity verification. Yes. The camera shows she offered credentials, suggested verification, complied with commands, and remained at the scene. Mercer shifted. She was still difficult. Laura looked at him. Judge Avery looked at him. The gallery looked at him. Monica did not. She was staring at the brass tag resting beside her portfolio. Laura's voice became quieter. Sergeant, I'm going to ask this once more. Mercer looked up. What exactly did Ms. Reed do that you considered threatening? For the first time since the recording began, Daniel Mercer had no answer ready. The silence stretched, not the uncomfortable kind people rush to fill, the heavier kind, the kind that makes everyone in a room realize a truth may be approaching before anyone is ready to hear it. Mercer shifted in the witness chair. His eyes moved toward Michael Grant. Grant did not rescue him. Laura Bennett waited. Judge Avery waited, The gallery waited. Even the rain against the courthouse windows seemed softer now. Mercer cleared his throat. She was challenging my authority. Laura's expression did not change. How? She kept asking questions. You've said that. She wouldn't just follow instructions. The monitor behind Laura still displayed the frozen image from the body camera. Monica standing beside the courthouse wall, hands visible, coat darkened by rain. No raised voice. No sudden movement. No attempt to leave. Laura glanced at the screen. Which instruction did she refuse to follow? Mercer's jaw tightened. I didn't say she refused. You just said she wouldn't follow instructions. I said she made everything difficult. Difficult for whom? Mercer leaned back. For the situation. Laura let that answer sit for a moment. Then she asked, Did Ms. Reed strike you? No. Threaten you? No. Move toward you? No. Attempt to bypass the security entrance after you stopped her? No. Provide false identification? No. Refuse verification? No. Carry contraband? No. Commit any offense in your presence? Mercer hesitated. No. Laura folded her hands in front of her. Then help us understand the threat. Mercer looked irritated now. The courtroom could see it. His face had reddened along the cheeks. The polished confidence he had carried into courtroom 7B was slipping. Not because Laura was shouting at him, but because she wasn't. Every answer was being given enough room to expose the next contradiction. Mercer finally said, You weren't there. Laura nodded. That's why we're watching your camera. A faint sound moved through the gallery. Not laughter, almost. Judge Avery looked up, and the room went still again. Mercer exhaled sharply. She didn't look right for the entrance. Laura's eyes narrowed slightly. What does that mean? You know what I mean. I don't. Mercer shifted again. She didn't look like courthouse staff. Laura glanced toward Monica. Monica remained still. Then back to Mercer. Was she required to be courthouse staff to use that entrance? No. Who else may use it? Authorized counsel. Certain federal personnel. Security-cleared individuals. Which Ms. Reed was. I know that now. Laura stopped. The words had opened something. She moved closer to the witness stand. You know that now. Mercer realized too late how the sentence sounded. He tried to repair it. What I mean is, at the time, I had no reason to know who she was. Laura's voice remained calm. Why should who she was have mattered? Mercer stared at her. It matters for security. Her credential established who she was, eventually. No, Sergeant. The credential was valid before you believed it. Mercer's mouth tightened. Laura continued. Courthouse security confirmed that credential. Yes. Ms. Reed herself suggested that verification. Yes. She carried the access tag for courtroom 7B. Yes. And even after all of that, you wrote that she had delayed satisfactory verification. Mercer looked away. Laura waited until he looked back. What did you expect someone authorized to use that entrance to look like? Michael Grant stood. Objection. Argumentative. Laura turned toward the bench. Your Honor, the witness has testified that appearance affected his decision-making. I am asking him to explain what that appearance communicated to him. Judge Avery looked at Mercer for a long moment. Overruled. Grant sat slowly. Laura repeated the question. What did you expect authorized counsel to look like? Mercer rubbed his thumb against the edge of the witness box. Professional. Laura's voice became quieter. Was Ms. Reed unclean? No. Was her clothing inappropriate? I didn't say inappropriate. Then what was unprofessional? Mercer stared at the floor. Her charcoal coat, the worn black flats, the scratched leather portfolio. Those were the things he had noticed. He had noticed them before her voice, before her identification, before the brass tag, before anything objective. Laura asked again. What was unprofessional? Mercer's eyes flicked toward Monica. For the first time since the hearing began, Monica met his gaze directly. There was no triumph in her face. That made it harder. She looked exactly as she had outside. Calm, tired, human. Mercer looked away first. She didn't look like she belonged there. No one moved. The words fell into the courtroom with the weight of something that could not be taken back. Laura did not respond immediately. She turned toward the monitor. The screen still showed Monica outside in the rain. Then Laura looked toward the counsel table, where Monica sat beneath the seal of the United States Department of Justice. Same woman, same face, same clothes. Only the room had changed. Laura turned back. You believed she didn't belong? Yes. Based on what? Mercer swallowed. Her appearance. The circumstances. What circumstances? She came to a secured entrance. So did every authorized person using it that morning. He said nothing. Laura took another step. Was Ms. Reed's coat prohibited? No. Her shoes? No. Her portfolio? No. Her race? Grant stood immediately. Objection. Judge Avery raised his hand. Ms. Bennett. Laura nodded once. I'll rephrase. She looked back at Mercer. Did anything about Ms. Reed's physical appearance violate courthouse policy? No. Yet her physical appearance contributed to your belief that she did not belong. Mercer said nothing. Sergeant? Yes. The admission was barely audible. Laura turned to the clerk. Could you display the incident warning again? The document appeared on the screen. Evasive behavior. Delayed satisfactory identity verification. Laura pointed to the words. This warning does not say Ms. Reed looked out of place. No. It does not say you made assumptions about her appearance. No. It presents the encounter as though her conduct caused the escalation. I wrote what happened. Laura looked at him. Did you? Mercer bristled. Yes. Then why doesn't the report include James Carter telling you she was verified 6 minutes earlier? Grant stood again. Asked and answered. Judge Avery nodded. Sustained. Move forward. Laura did, and now the question everyone in the room could feel approaching finally came. Sergeant Mercer, if you had known when Ms. Reed first approached that door that she was a senior trial attorney with the United States Department of Justice, would you have handled the encounter differently? Mercer froze. Grant leaned forward slightly. Not enough to interrupt. Enough to warn him. Mercer saw it. The smart answer was obvious. No. The proper answer was that everyone received the same treatment. That status did not matter. That policy was policy. He knew what he was supposed to say. But 18 minutes of video sat behind him. The scattered papers, the credentials, the brass tag, the warning. The courtroom had already seen too much. Mercer tried to build an answer. If I had known she was federal counsel, then obviously there would have been less uncertainty. Laura said nothing. The answer was not enough. Judge Avery watched. Mercer continued. I mean, yes, it would have changed the context. Laura's voice softened. Would you have put her against the wall? Mercer looked at Grant. Grant's face had gone still. Probably not. Would you have opened her portfolio after she refused consent? Mercer's mouth went dry. Probably not. Would you have told her that anyone could buy credentials that looked official? He stared forward. No. Would you have written the incident warning? Silence. Sergeant? Probably not. Laura let several seconds pass. Then she asked the simplest question of the morning. Why? Mercer's face tightened. No answer came. Laura waited. Why would knowing her title have changed the dignity you gave her before you knew it? Grant stood. Objection. Judge Avery looked at Laura. She nodded. Withdrawn. But the question had already reached everyone who mattered. Monica lowered her eyes for the first time. Not because she had won, because something inside her hurt. For years, people had told her the same lesson without saying the words aloud. Wear the right suit, carry the right title, enter through the right door, show the right credential. Then maybe someone would decide you were worthy of the courtesy others received automatically. Mercer's testimony had simply spoken the hidden rule out loud. The courtroom doors opened quietly at the back. Walter Price stepped inside. He had arrived from Morning Star, still wearing his old brown work jacket. Laura had asked him to come if he could. He found a seat near the rear. Monica saw him. Their eyes met. Walter gave her one small nod. She almost smiled. Then Judge Avery looked toward Captain Rebecca Foster, seated behind the city attorneys. The judge's voice changed the direction of the entire hearing. Captain Foster. Rebecca stood. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Avery removed his glasses. Before this court accepts any suggestion that today's encounter was an isolated failure of judgment, I want an answer to something. Mercer turned toward her. Foster did not look at him. Judge Avery continued. Is this truly Sergeant Mercer's first complaint of this nature? Captain Foster's face lost color. And in the gallery, Walter Price slowly sat forward. For several seconds, Captain Rebecca Foster did not answer. She stood behind the city table with both hands resting lightly on the back of the chair in front of her. The courtroom seemed to notice the hesitation before she did. Judge Avery noticed it too. Captain? Foster drew a breath. No, Your Honor. The answer was quiet, but it changed the room. Mercer turned toward her so sharply that Michael Grant reached for his sleeve. What does that mean? Mercer whispered. Grant did not answer. Laura Bennett already had a folder open. Judge Avery leaned forward. Explain. Foster's eyes moved briefly toward Mercer, then away. Sergeant Mercer has received prior complaints concerning escalation during stops, disputed searches, and the way civilian behavior was characterized in written reports. How many? Foster hesitated again. 23 over several years. The number moved through the courtroom like a low electrical current. Someone in the gallery shifted. Another person exhaled. Walter Price did not move at all. Mercer's face tightened. Most were cleared, he said under his breath. Grant turned toward him. Stop talking. Laura rose. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to mark several previously closed complaint files for review. Grant stood. Objection. These complaints were adjudicated internally. Reopening them based on one incident today risks turning this hearing into a referendum on every disputed encounter in Sergeant Mercer's career. Judge Avery looked at Foster. Were these files reviewed against available body camera recordings? Foster's pause was answer enough. Not consistently. Grant slowly sat down. Judge Avery nodded toward Laura. Proceed. Laura lifted the first folder. This complaint was filed 3 years ago by Walter Price. Walter's name seemed to strike Monica harder than anything else had that morning. She turned toward the gallery. There he was, brown work jacket, weathered hands folded over one knee. The same man who had teased her about her old portfolio only a few hours earlier. The same man who had let her carry the heavier box to his car because he trusted her enough to stop pretending he did not need help. Monica had known Walter had once complained about a police stop. She had not known Mercer's name was attached to it. Walter looked back at her. No anger, just a tired kind of recognition. Laura opened the file. Mr. Price was 65 at the time, retired transit mechanic. No criminal record. He was stopped late in the evening near Lynn Street for a dim license plate light. Mercer looked down. The memory came back more clearly now. Old sedan. Cold night. A man asking why. Laura continued. Sergeant Mercer's report describes Mr. Price as hostile, evasive, and unwilling to cooperate with reasonable officer safety measures. Walter's jaw tightened. Laura lifted a second page. Mr. Price's complaint states that he provided identification, remained at the scene, refused consent to a vehicle search, and repeatedly asked why that search was necessary. Judge Avery looked toward Foster. What was found in the vehicle? Nothing illegal. How long was he detained? Foster checked the record. 41 minutes. Walter lowered his eyes. Monica watched him. She imagined him standing beneath a streetlight for 41 minutes, saying the wrong thing only because Mercer had decided a question was defiance. Laura looked toward the rear. Mr. Price, would you please stand? Walter rose slowly. He did not look like a man entering a legal battle. He looked like what he was, a 68-year-old retiree in an old brown jacket who had spent years being told an unpleasant night was not serious enough to matter. Laura asked, "Did you file this complaint?" "Yes, ma'am." "Did anyone ever tell you why your account was rejected?" Walter swallowed. "They told me the officer's actions were within policy." His voice was steady, but thin. "Did anyone show you the body camera footage?" "No." "Did anyone ask whether the words hostile and evasive accurately described your behavior?" Walter looked toward Mercer. "No." Laura thanked him. Walter sat. Monica kept watching him for another second. Then Laura opened a second folder. Denise Walker. A 57-year-old black home health worker seated 2 rows behind. Walter straightened. Monica recognized her from a witness list prepared weeks earlier, though they had never met. Laura read from the file. Ms. Walker reported being stopped after leaving an evening care assignment. Sergeant Mercer requested permission to search her vehicle. She asked why. Mercer stared at the table. Laura continued. The report describes Ms. Walker as evasive, argumentative, and creating officer safety concerns. Denise shook her head once. Laura looked toward her. "Ms. Walker, were you arrested?" "No." "Any contraband discovered?" "No." "Any weapon?" "No." "Did you threaten Sergeant Mercer?" "No." "What did you do?" Denise's answer came immediately. "I asked why he wanted to search my car." The courtroom went silent again. The same pattern. A question, then a label. Laura placed both reports side by side on the evidence display. Walter Price. Denise Walker. Then Mercer's warning from that morning. 3 documents. 3 different years. 3 different people. The same language. Evasive. Officer safety. Failure to cooperate. Laura did not need to dramatize it. The words did the work. Judge Avery looked at Mercer. Michael Grant rubbed his forehead. Captain Foster stared straight ahead. Laura opened a 3rd folder, then a 4th. Not every complaint was identical. Some involved traffic stops. Some involved pedestrian contacts. Some involved search requests. But certain phrases repeated with unsettling precision. Subject became evasive when questioned. Officer safety concern due to argumentative behavior. Failed to cooperate with reasonable instructions. And beneath those phrases were adults who described something much simpler. They had asked what they had done wrong. They had asked whether they were free to leave. They had declined searches. They had asked for supervisors. They had expected questions to be answered rather than punished. Laura turned to Foster. "Captain, when these complaints were reviewed, did supervisors compare the language in Sergeant Mercer's reports across cases?" "No." "Did anyone flag the repeated wording?" "Not formally." "Did anyone examine whether calm legal questions were repeatedly being described as threatening behavior?" Foster's face tightened. "No." "Why not?" Foster took a breath. The complaints were generally handled as separate incidents. Laura looked toward Judge Avery. Separate incidents. She returned to the display. The repeated phrases glowed on the screen. Different names. Different dates. Same officer. Same language. Monica felt sorrow more than satisfaction. This was what she had feared outside. Not merely that Mercer had misjudged her, that he was comfortable doing it. Comfort came from repetition, from practice, from surviving consequences that never arrived. Walter watched the reports appear one after another. His eyes had grown wet. He wiped them quickly with the side of one thumb. Monica saw. So did Laura. Laura's voice softened. "Mr. Price, when your complaint was closed, what did you believe?" Walter looked up. "That maybe I had remembered it wrong." The sentence struck Monica harder than any accusation. Walter continued. "They sent the letter, said no violation. He had the badge, he had the report. I figured maybe the way I felt about it didn't count for much." Monica's hand moved toward her portfolio. Her fingers rested against the old leather. 22 years earlier, a firm had written her out of a job using polished phrases that made fairness sound like insubordination. Walter had received different paperwork, same wound. When power controlled the record long enough, people could begin doubting their own memory. Monica looked toward him. Walter looked back. He did not need her title then. He needed somebody to believe the truth had existed before a system approved it. Judge Avery broke the silence. Ms. Bennett, do you have corresponding recordings for these complaints? Laura closed the folder. Some, Your Honor. Mercer looked up. Laura's next words drained what remained of the confidence from his face. Several archived body camera files were preserved automatically, even though the complaints were later closed. Foster turned toward Laura. Michael Grant stopped writing. Laura continued. We began comparing those recordings to Sergeant Mercer's written descriptions last week. Judge Avery's voice lowered. And? Laura looked at Mercer. In multiple cases, the video does not appear to match the language used in the reports. Mercer's mouth opened. Grant put one hand flat on the table. Do not. Mercer shut it. Laura lifted another document. There's also a phrase repeated almost word for word across several reports involving different civilians over different years. She turned the page toward the judge. We're checking every corresponding video we can recover. Walter sat perfectly still. Monica looked at the old man she had helped carry groceries that morning and understood that her own humiliation had become something much larger. It was no longer about one wrong door. It was about every door that had closed after someone like Walter tried to tell the truth. Judge Avery removed his glasses. Preserve all of it. Laura nodded. Already underway, Your Honor. Mercer stared at the screen where his own words were lined up beside one another. For years, those reports had protected him. Now they looked less like protection and more like a trail. The first recovered video began with darkness. For a second, the courtroom monitor showed only grainy black and gray. Then the image stabilized beneath a streetlight. A sedan, wet pavement. Walter Price standing beside the driver's door with both hands visible. 3 years younger, but unmistakable. Mercer stared at the screen. Walter stared too. The body camera microphone picked up his own voice. Sir, I'm asking why you need to search the car. Nothing in his tone was raised. Nothing sounded hostile. Nothing sounded evasive. Mercer's recorded voice answered from behind the camera. Because I told you to step back. Walter did. The video continued. He provided identification. He remained where instructed. He asked again what justified the search. Laura Bennett paused the footage. On the screen, Walter stood under the white glow of the street lamp, his old brown jacket zipped to his neck. Laura lifted Mercer's written report from the same night. She read one line. Subject became hostile and increasingly evasive when questioned. Then she looked at the frozen image. No one needed help understanding the contradiction. Walter's eyes dropped to his hands. Monica watched him from counsel table. He had spent 3 years living with a letter telling him that night had happened differently. Now the camera was giving the night back to him. Judge Avery spoke. Continue. The next video belonged to Denise Walker. A parking lot outside a 24-hour pharmacy. Fluorescent light humming overhead. Denise standing beside her car after finishing an evening home health assignment. Mercer asked permission to search. Denise said no. Then asked why he wanted to. Again, the words were calm. Again, the report later called them argumentative. Laura did not comment. She simply placed the video beside the paperwork. The pattern became more powerful with less explanation. A third recording. A fourth. Different streets. Different weather. Different adults. Same sequence. Question. Escalation. Label. Report. Closed complaint. Captain Rebecca Foster sat with her shoulders drawn tight. The more footage played, the more the problem shifted away from Daniel Mercer alone. Because every video had existed, every report had existed, and the department had possessed both. Judge Avery turned toward Foster. Captain, who reviewed these complaints? Foster looked at the files. Different supervisors, depending on the year and assignment. Did they have access to the recordings? In most cases, yes. Did anyone conduct a direct comparison between the report language and the body camera footage? Not consistently. Judge Avery leaned back. That phrase again. Foster lowered her eyes. Laura stepped forward. Your Honor, We found the same procedural weakness across multiple files. The officer narrative was treated as the primary record. The video was sometimes viewed only if the civilian account directly alleged physical force or misconduct, serious enough to trigger enhanced review. Michael Grant stood. Your Honor, I need to object to the characterization of an entire department based on selected complaints. Judge Avery looked at him. Then characterize it accurately. Grant stopped. The judge continued. What do your policies require? Grant turned toward Foster. She answered. Supervisors are expected to review available evidence. Expected? Yes. Required? Foster hesitated. In certain categories. Judge Avery's expression hardened, and complaints alleging verbal escalation, unnecessary detention, or coercive search requests? Not always mandatory for full video review. Laura opened another binder. That is one of the failures under examination. Mercer leaned toward Grant. This is getting ridiculous. Grant didn't look at him. No. This is getting documented. The words hit differently now. Laura advanced the display. A chart appeared. Not dramatic. Just names, dates, complaint numbers, report phrases, and available recordings. 23 complaints. Some minor. Some ambiguous. Some unsupported. But enough shared the same language to make coincidence difficult to defend. One phrase appeared over and over. Subject became increasingly evasive after lawful questioning. Laura highlighted it. 11 reports. Judge Avery looked at Mercer. Mercer stared back at the screen. Laura highlighted another. Officer safety concern due to argumentative behavior. 8 reports. Another. Failed to cooperate with reasonable instructions. 9 reports. Different people. Different years. Same wording. Laura spoke quietly. We are not suggesting repetition alone proves misconduct. We are saying repetition creates a reason to compare the reports to the recordings. Judge Avery nodded. That seems obvious. Foster flinched slightly. Laura continued. When investigators did that comparison, several recordings showed people behaving significantly more calmly than the reports suggested. Mercer sat forward. You're cherry-picking. Grant grabbed his arm. Enough. Mercer pulled away. Judge Avery looked toward him. Sergeant, you will speak only when directed. Mercer went still. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned back to Foster. Were repeat complaints against the same officer ever automatically escalated for independent review? No. Why? Foster's answer was quiet. Policy did not require it. Judge Avery looked across the courtroom. Then perhaps the policy is part of the problem. The sentence changed the scale of everything. Monica felt it immediately. This was no longer one officer and one humiliating morning. It was no longer just Walter or Denise. It was the machinery around them. A system that could collect complaints, collect video, collect reports, and still never place the pieces beside each other. Laura requested preservation orders. All body camera footage involving Mercer that remained available. All complaint records. All supervisory review notes. All incident reports. All internal communications concerning repeat conduct complaints. All training and counseling records. Judge Avery granted them. He also ordered the city to prevent deletion or routine destruction of any remaining materials while the federal review continued. Michael Grant objected to the scope. The judge narrowed one category, then granted the rest. Mercer's face had gone pale. He whispered, "This is because of her." Grant finally turned. "No." Mercer frowned. Grant's voice stayed low. "This is because the files exist." Mercer looked toward Monica. She had heard him. She did not react. That hurt him more than anger would have. Outside the courtroom, the consequences began before the hearing even adjourned. Captain Foster received an encrypted message on her phone. Professional standards had been instructed to open a formal internal investigation. Mercer's street authority was suspended pending review. A second message followed. Administrative leave effective immediately. Foster read it twice, then folded her phone screen dark. Mercer saw her expression. What? She said nothing until Judge Avery called a recess. Then, in the side corridor, Foster stopped him. "Daniel." "What?" "You're being placed on administrative leave." Mercer stared at her. "For what?" "Pending investigation." "You've got to be kidding. Turn over your department credentials and service equipment when we return to headquarters." His face reddened. "You knew about these complaints. You signed off on some of them." Foster's eyes hardened. "I know." That answer stopped him. Not because she denied it, because she didn't. For the first time, the failure had reached upward. Foster was not being allowed to stand outside the consequences either. "I'll be subject to review," she added. "So will other supervisors." Mercer looked down the corridor. Rainwater streaked the high windows. At the far end, Walter stood beside Denise. Monica had joined them. Walter was speaking quietly. Monica listened with both hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee someone had brought her. No victory celebration, no press, no revenge. Just people whose memories had finally been placed beside the evidence. Mercer watched them, then looked at the badge still clipped inside his suit jacket. For years, he had believed the badge was the thing that made his version carry more weight. Now the videos were carrying more. Back inside, Judge Avery resumed the hearing. He announced that the federal review would expand to examine supervisory practices, preservation rules, repeated officer complaints, and the department's standards for comparing narrative reports against recorded evidence. The consequences were no longer personal. They were structural. Monica listened until the judge finished. Then she stood. "Your Honor, may I make one request regarding the scope?" Judge Avery nodded. "Go ahead, Ms. Reed." Walter looked toward her. So did Foster. So did Mercer. Monica glanced once at the rows of reopened names. Then she said, "I don't want this to end with Sergeant Mercer." The courtroom went silent again, and this time, even Walter did not know what she meant. Monica stood at the federal counsel table with one hand resting on the scratched brown portfolio. For most of the morning, that old leather case had been treated like evidence of what she was not. Not important enough. Not polished enough. Not the kind of person Sergeant Daniel Mercer expected to see at a secured courthouse entrance. Now it sat beneath the seal of the United States, holding the warning he had written, the damp pages he had scattered, and the brass tag he had mocked. But Monica did not look at Mercer. She looked at Judge Avery. "Your Honor, Sergeant Mercer has to answer for his own conduct. I am not asking this court to excuse that." Mercer lowered his eyes. Monica continued. "But if we stop at one officer, we risk pretending one officer created all of this by himself." Captain Rebecca Foster sat motionless behind the city table. That sentence belonged to her too. Monica gestured toward the rows of complaint files. Walter Price filed a complaint. Walter looked up. Denise Walker filed a complaint. Other adults filed complaints. Some of them described similar conduct years apart. The department had reports. In several cases, it had video. Yet the people making those complaints were treated as isolated voices, while the officer's written narrative became the center of the record. Judge Avery listened without interrupting. Monica's voice never rose. That is not simply a question of whether one sergeant exercised poor judgment. It is a question of what a system does after someone says, "This happened to me." The words settled over the courtroom. For Walter, they carried the weight of 3 years. For Denise, the memory of standing beside her car after a long work shift while someone with authority told her that asking why had made her suspicious. For Foster, they meant pages she had signed, recommendations that had stopped too early, policies she had accepted because they were the policies already in place. For Mercer, they meant something worse. Monica was taking the story away from him. Until that moment, even his downfall had revolved around Daniel Mercer. His badge, his reports, his leave, his discipline. Now Monica was widening the frame. Judge Avery leaned forward. "What are you asking the court to consider, Ms. Reed? Independent review for disputed stops involving repeated complaints against the same officer." Laura Bennett opened a binder beside her. Monica continued. "Automatic preservation of body camera footage whenever a civilian complaint is filed. A requirement that supervisors compare officer narratives against available video before closing serious complaints. And a system that flags repeated language and repeated allegations instead of treating every file as though it exists in a vacuum." Michael Grant listened without objecting. There were moments when argument helped. This was not one of them. Monica looked toward Captain Foster. And supervisory review should mean review, not merely checking whether a report is complete. Foster absorbed the words. Yes, she said quietly. Judge Avery looked at her. Captain? Foster stood. Her voice was lower than it had been earlier. Ms. Reed is right about that, Your Honor. Mercer looked at her sharply. Foster did not turn toward him. We had information in separate places. We did not connect it. That failure belongs to the department. The admission drew no dramatic reaction, just silence. But it was the first time anyone from inside the institution had said it plainly. Judge Avery made several notes. The court will incorporate those concerns into the continuing federal review. Specific remedies will require further briefing, but preservation and comparative review directives already issued remain in force. He looked toward Grant. The city will cooperate fully. Grant nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Then Judge Avery looked toward Mercer. Sergeant Mercer, your administrative leave and internal disciplinary status are matters for your department, subject to any additional findings that arise from this review. Mercer's face was pale. He had spent years believing consequences were events that happened to other people after he wrote about them. Now his own name was inside a process he could not control. Captain Foster had already received instructions removing him from street duty. Professional standards would examine his reports. His prior encounters would be compared against video. Supervisors who had approved weak reviews would face scrutiny of their own. Depending on what investigators found, the consequences could go far beyond temporary leave. Mercer looked at Monica. For a brief moment, something in his face suggested he expected her to enjoy it. She didn't. There was no smile, no satisfaction, only exhaustion. That unsettled him more than hatred might have, because hatred would have allowed him to make himself the victim. Monica denied him even that comfort. Judge Avery recessed the hearing shortly after noon. The courtroom emptied into a corridor filled with camera flashes, damp coats, and urgent voices. Word had already spread. A local television crew waited near the elevators. 2 reporters called Monica's name when she stepped through the doors. Ms. Reed, can we get your reaction? Do you believe Sergeant Mercer should be fired? Will the Justice Department pursue additional action? Monica stopped. Walter and Denise stood several feet behind her. Laura remained near the courtroom entrance. Monica looked toward the cameras. If you cover this story, don't make me the only name in it. The reporters quieted. There were people who complained before this morning. Talk about what happened to them. Talk about why their records were closed. Talk about what changes after somebody without my job title says the same thing. A reporter asked, but your position is what brought attention to the issue. Monica's expression tightened. That is exactly the problem. Then she stepped away. No television interview, no courthouse victory speech, no attempt to turn humiliation into celebrity. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. Cincinnati looked washed clean but cold, the pavement reflecting pale afternoon light between the courthouse and the buildings across the street. Walter waited near the bottom of the limestone steps. For the first time all day, Monica's shoulders relaxed when she saw him. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. He tried to smile. It didn't quite work. For a moment, they simply stood there while courthouse workers passed around them. Walter looked toward the building, then toward Monica. They listened because it happened to you. There was no accusation in his voice. That made it sadder. Monica reached for his hand. His fingers were rough from decades of tools, engines, grease, bolts, and cold metal. She held them gently. Then we're going to make sure they keep listening when it happens to someone they don't know. Walter's eyes filled. He looked away toward the street. You know what bothered me most? Monica waited. When they closed my complaint, I started wondering if maybe I had been difficult. She squeezed his hand. You weren't. I know that now. No. Monica shook her head. You knew it then. They just made you doubt yourself. Walter looked back at her. Something in his face loosened. Not complete healing, but the beginning of it. Across the plaza, Mercer came through another courthouse exit with Captain Foster and Michael Grant. No badge visible. No easy stride. He did not approach Monica. She did not call after him. Justice did not need a final insult. Mercer had disciplinary proceedings ahead of him. Foster and other supervisors faced review. The federal inquiry would continue long after the cameras left. Monica turned back toward Walter. "You need a ride?" "My car still runs." "That wasn't my question." Walter almost laughed. "There she is." Monica smiled for the first time since morning. 3 weeks later, an official envelope arrived at Walter Price's house. He stood in his kitchen for nearly 10 minutes before opening it. Inside was a notice from Professional Standards. His complaint had been formally reopened. The investigation would include preserved body camera footage, Mercer's original report, and supervisory review records. Walter read the first page twice. Then he picked up his phone. Monica answered on the third ring. Neither of them spoke at first. Finally, Walter said, "They opened it." Monica closed her eyes. Outside her office window, late afternoon traffic moved through Cincinnati beneath a clearing sky. "I know, how?" "They sent notice to counsel too." Walter let out a breath that sounded as though he had been holding it for 3 years. Monica looked at the scratched portfolio resting beside her desk. Morning Star would begin breakfast service early Saturday. She already knew where she would be, and for the first time since the courthouse steps, the place she wanted to return to was not Courtroom 7B. It was the warm yellow room in the West End where nobody had ever needed to see her title before handing her an apron. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear. The rain that had darkened Cincinnati for most of the week was gone, leaving the streets washed clean beneath a pale winter sky. In the West End, buses sighed at their stops. Delivery trucks rattled over patched pavement. Somewhere down the block, a metal storefront gate rolled upward with a long mechanical groan. Inside Morning Star Community Kitchen, the windows glowed gold. Coffee steamed behind the serving counter. Butter hissed across a griddle. Forks clicked against plates while adult volunteers moved between tables carrying oatmeal, eggs, toast, and paper cups filled with hot coffee. Monica Reed stood near the pantry, wearing the same charcoal coat she had worn to the courthouse. Her worn black flats were damp from a shallow puddle outside. The scratched brown leather portfolio rested on a chair near the wall. Nothing about her announced what had happened 3 weeks earlier. No camera crew waited outside. No federal seal followed her through the door. No one introduced her as senior trial attorney Monica Reed of the United States Department of Justice. Helen Brooks, 66, the kitchen's longtime volunteer coordinator, had simply looked up when Monica walked in and said, "You're late." Monica checked the clock. 29 seconds. Helen pointed toward a stack of aprons. "Disgraceful." Monica smiled. That was all. Within minutes, she was pouring coffee again. A 62-year-old man with an injured shoulder struggled to carry his breakfast tray, so Monica took it without being asked and walked beside him to a table. A 54-year-old woman arrived soaked from a broken bus shelter several blocks away. Monica found a dry towel in the supply closet, made her tea, and gave her the seat nearest the radiator. When another volunteer tried to thank Monica for staying late enough to reorganize donated food boxes, she shook her head. "Everybody's working." That was Monica. She never seemed to keep a private account of the kindness she gave away. Walter Price did. He arrived shortly after 7. The old brown work jacket came through the door first, followed by Walter carrying an official white envelope in one hand. Monica saw the envelope. She did not immediately mention it. "Morning." Walter stared at her. "You knew I was coming." "I hoped." "You could have told me you'd be here. Then you wouldn't have been surprised." "I don't like surprises anymore." Monica poured him coffee. "Fair enough." Walter accepted the cup but did not drink. For several seconds, he simply held the envelope. The paperwork inside had arrived 2 days earlier. Professional Standards had formally reopened his complaint. Not reconsidered. Not informally reviewed. Reopened. Investigators had compared his original statement with Mercer's report and the preserved body camera footage. The letter acknowledged inconsistencies significant enough to require a new finding and supervisory review. It did not erase what happened beneath that streetlight 3 years earlier. It did something Walter had stopped believing institutions knew how to do. It admitted that the first answer might have been wrong. "They called me yesterday," he said. Monica leaned against the counter. "Who?" "Investigator from Professional Standards." "What did they say?" "They want me to come in Monday." Walter looked down at the envelope. "They're going through everything again." Monica nodded. Good. He gave a quiet laugh. That's all you've got? What do you want? Fireworks? Walter finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. They finally believed me. Monica's smile disappeared. She stepped closer. The kitchen continued around them. Coffee pouring, plates moving, a bus braking outside. Ordinary life making ordinary noise while one man's 3-year wound finally opened enough to begin healing. Monica placed her hand over Walter's. You were telling the truth before anybody believed you. Walter's mouth tightened. He looked toward the floor. For 3 years, he had carried a question he had never admitted aloud. Was I really difficult? Did I make it worse? Should I have just said yes? People often imagined that injustice ended when the bad moment ended. Monica knew better. Sometimes its longest life began afterward, when a person replayed the event until someone else's version started replacing their own memory. Walter folded the letter carefully. I wish I'd known that 3 years ago. You did. He shook his head. No. I wanted to. Monica squeezed his hand. Then start knowing it now. Walter breathed out slowly. This time, some of the weight seemed to leave with the air. Across the city, Daniel Mercer's world had changed too. The department's internal investigation remained active. He was still on administrative leave and removed from street duty. His body camera recordings and reports were under formal review. Disciplinary proceedings had begun, and depending on the final findings, additional professional consequences remained possible. But Mercer was no longer the only name being examined. Supervisors who had approved weak complaint reviews were being questioned. Captain Rebecca Foster had submitted years of documentation and acknowledged that repeated allegations should have triggered broader scrutiny long before Monica approached Courtroom 7B. The federal review required new preservation procedures. Complaints involving disputed stops would retain related body camera recordings automatically. Repeat complaints against the same officer would trigger additional review. Available video would have to be compared against narrative reports before serious complaints could be closed. No policy could guarantee fairness, but excuses would become harder to hide behind. Monica had insisted on that. Not punishment without process. Not humiliation. Structure. Accountability. Memory. She wanted a system that remembered even when the person filing the complaint did not have a federal title beside their name. By 8:30, Morning Star was crowded. Walter had joined the serving line. Helen moved beside Monica, carrying clean cups when she noticed the brown portfolio against the wall. She stopped. Please tell me that's not the same bag. Monica followed her gaze. What bag? Helen stared at her. That thing. My portfolio? That archaeological artifact you insist on carrying. Walter laughed from across the counter. I've been telling her. Helen walked over and lifted it carefully. The leather was worn smooth along the handle. One corner carried a faint water stain from the courthouse pavement. Inside, the folded incident warning remained tucked among Monica's papers, and attached near the inner pocket was the scratched brass access tag. 7B. COUNSEL. Helen turned it over in her fingers. So this is the famous key? Access tag. Don't ruin the story. Monica smiled. Helen inspected the portfolio again. You're a senior federal attorney. You cannot tell me you can't afford a new one. I can. Then why are you carrying this? Monica looked at the bag. For a moment, she saw 2 versions of it at once. The portfolio Mercer had looked at and decided was too shabby to belong near federal counsel. And the portfolio she had carried through years of difficult cases, long nights, courtrooms, community meetings, and mornings at Morning Star. It had held the brass tag before Mercer knew what the tag meant. It had held her credentials before he believed them. It had held her work before anyone outside needed proof that the woman carrying it mattered. Monica ran her hand across the scratched leather. Because it still does its job. Helen smiled. Walter looked down at his coffee. Something about the answer moved him. Near 10, breakfast service began winding down. Monica washed her hands, collected her coat, and tucked the portfolio beneath her arm. Walter followed her toward the door. You going back to the office? Eventually. Court? Monday. He nodded, then stopped. Monica. She turned. Walter struggled for a moment to find the words. You could have buried him. She knew who he meant. No. You know what I mean. I do. Walter looked through the front window at sunlight hitting the wet street. After what he did, I don't know if I would have cared what happened to him. Monica considered that. I cared what happened to the truth. Walter looked at her. That's different. It has to be. She adjusted the portfolio under her arm. If justice only means hurting the person who hurt you, eventually everybody learns the same lesson Mercer did. What lesson? That power is about what you can do to somebody. Walter slowly nodded. Monica opened the door. Cold air entered the kitchen. Outside, the West End moved through another Saturday morning. A city bus pulled away from the curb with a deep diesel rumble. Sunlight reflected from rainwater gathered in the cracks of the sidewalk. Across the street, someone opened a small restaurant and switched on a red neon sign that flickered twice before glowing steadily. Monica stepped onto the sidewalk. Same charcoal coat. Same worn black flats. Same old portfolio. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel Mercer had looked at those things and decided they told him how much respect the woman wearing them deserved. He had been wrong before Monica ever opened Courtroom 7B. Her federal title did not make her dignified. The brass key did not make her worthy. The seal of the United States did not transform her into someone deserving basic respect. Those things only forced a room full of people, and eventually an institution, to confront how easily they had measured human worth by appearance, authority, and status. Behind her, Walter came to the doorway. Counselor. Monica turned. He held up the reopened complaint letter. This time he was smiling. Monica smiled back. Then she walked toward the busier downtown streets, the scratched portfolio secure beneath her arm. She did not walk like someone who had defeated a man. She walked like someone who had finally made a door stay open for the people coming after her. And somewhere between the warm yellow kitchen behind her and Courtroom 7B waiting across the city, the lesson remained simple. No one should have needed to know Monica Reed's title before treating her with dignity. Should Daniel Mercer have needed to know who she was before treating her like she belonged? Walter Price spent 3 years wondering whether his own memory could be trusted because an official report carried more weight than his voice. This story reminds us that accountability begins when we are willing to examine the record again, especially when the person asking to be heard has already been dismissed once. Today, think of one person whose concern you may have brushed aside too quickly, and give them a few uninterrupted minutes to explain what happened. You don't need Monica Reed's authority to take someone seriously before a title, badge, or courtroom forces you to. If you had been standing outside that courthouse when Monica's papers fell into the rain, would you have stayed silent? Or stepped forward to help her? Tell me below, because sometimes the smallest choice made by a witness says as much as the actions everyone remembers. And in the next story, one quiet moment will reveal something no one in the room sees coming.